Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Live at 5. I am your host, curator with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research, Kevin Adkison, and it is Tuesday, and so we're doing Live at 5. It's been a busy day here at the center working with current Academy of Art student Melissa Webb, creating a new installation over at the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House that I'll show you next week. But it did mean that I was just racking my brain with what to talk about, and so I decided to come and talk about the gates of Cranbrook House. And these gates are not actually the oldest, or the original location of these gates. These are from the north, the original main entrance of Cranbrook, which is over on Cranbrook Road, up a hill. You see the sort of crumbling stone columns are still there today. They got moved here in 2015, I guess, 2014, 2015, to become the exit gates. And so I want to actually talk about the original entrance gates for the south entrance, what we now use to get in and out of Cranbrook House. And so I'm standing here alongside Lone Pine Road and the beautiful Christ Church Cranbrook with its property and the Christmas tree, which gives me validation to still have some of my Christmas trees up, in its landscape by Frederick Law Olmsted. Cranbrook Academy of Art and Cranbrook Schools are down that way. A little shed by Booth and Swanson. And then we get to the original south entrance to the Cranbrook estate. And these gates were installed in 1917, and they are a collaborative effort between two of America's great ironworkers, one of which is known as an ironworker, the other is known as George Booth, founder of Cranbrook, newspaper man. But it was actually George Booth who was first an iron worker. And he wrote in 1884 to his partner that he envisioned establishing a new kind of iron company where instead of looking through a catalog, he would design or he would build his business with his pencil. And so part of the Booth Ironworks was that everything was custom made. Eventually, I think they did have a catalog and things were standardized a bit, but I think it's interesting that here at Cranbrook, where we have so many beautiful gates and so much beautiful metal art, our founder was first and foremost in the metal business. And he got that from his father and his grandfather and all the Booths before them who were coppersmiths in Cranbrook, England. So fast forward to 1904, they buy this connection. Not sure why I'm losing connection, considering that the steeple of Christ Church has a cell phone tower on it, much to, I think, my benefit as a resident of Bloomfield Hills and loss of the aesthetics. Either way, we're here in front of this gate, and we know that Cranbrook started in 1904 because if we look at this pier, it does have the AD 1904. And so these grand iron gates led into the Booth family estate, but they were not commissioned and fabricated until 1917. And they were made by the Philadelphia-based, Ukrainian, Russian-born metalsmith Samuel Yellin. So if you study much about American architectural history, particularly in the teens, 20s, and 30s, all the way through 1940, any great estate is going to have gates by Samuel Yellin. Where at Yale, all of the gates are by Samuel Yellin. At University of Michigan, there are multiple Samuel Yellin gates. He really was the sort of master of ironwork, of custom ironwork in the early 20th century. And so I think George Booth respected the skills of Samuel Yellin, and he wanted to have a piece of his here on the property. He ended up working with Samuel Yellin again at Cranbrook House with the 1918 edition, where Samuel Yellin did some of the door knockers and some of the internal stair railings were by Samuel Yellin. But here, the design is actually attributed to George Booth, which is fairly unusual. I mean, you were hiring Samuel Yellin for his skill in iron, but also for his skill as a designer. But of course, George Booth was also a skilled designer. And so the sort of initial sketches, which are over at Cranbrook Archives, were done by Booth, our founder, and then they're rendered in iron by Samuel Yellin. And part of what Yellin is known for is his handworking technique. And so if you look at these iron bars, they're quite clearly not just stock iron. They've been hammered into this shape, and they really give you that handcrafted feeling. And then I will step inside the gate to look at some of the other details, because Samuel Yellin really has a way of working with iron and turning it into sort of natural forms. And so see how it's been taken to the forge and then hammered on the anvil into these leaf forms that have these wonderful wobbly bits. And then there are also all sorts of details that are added on, and so the very neoclassical design that gets thinner and thicker as you look at the iron stock. And so not only is it getting larger and smaller dimensionally this way, but it's also larger and smaller this way as well. So you can see how the end of the curlicues begin to thin out. And so it has a real depth to it that you can only appreciate at a slightly slower pace. And then on this side of the piers, with the Indiana limestone piers, you have these fruit swags, and then the shell up above, and then the great balls on either side. Now, it is interesting that here on this arts and crafts estate, we have these essentially Renaissance gates. They've never quite lined up in my mind, but of course it's all from the mind of George Booth. And he, by 1918, even his architecture was becoming more classicizing. So perhaps, had he done these in 1904, we would see a very different type of gate than we did in 1918. So originally, this would have been the south entrance into the estate, and you would have come up the one-way road and then wound your way up to Cranbrook House. Now, those of you who have been around Cranbrook long enough know that eventually this meadow here became a playing field, and then it became a sort of muddy place where you had to park. And so about 5 years ago, when Cranbrook built the new parking lot here, which is the staff and visitors to Cranbrook House and Gardens, the decision was also made to save the north gate. Don't I lose connection? In those dark early days of the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research without Kevin, the project was conceived and completed to move the gates from what is essentially now the woods of Kingswood. So you can still see them if you look from your car. Right as you pass Kingswood, you'll see the piers there. The gates were taken out about 20 years ago. And then 5 years ago, the gates were restored and placed here at the exit. Now, the piers are not carved with anything on this side. I advocate that we should do something like drive safe, add a little humor to the flourish, or to this formal gateway. It's also not salted here at all. Now, one thing, when they built these stone piers to move the north gates to become the exit gates, they built the piers based off of the original architectural drawings. When the gates arrived, the gates did not fit. When they went back and looked at the architectural drawings, they noticed there was some eraser marks, and the gates had not fit originally either. And so instead of actually measuring the piece of iron, they went with the 100-year-old drawing. Didn't work in 1917, didn't work in 2015, so the gates had to be extended once again. And we see here that these are a little bit different. And as part of their restoration, pieces had to be refabricated and added on. And so here you see how some of these pieces date back to Samuel Yellin, the fish and the flowers, and then some of these we can trace to Cleveland and the Inter-Museum Art Conservator Group, the ICA, Inter-Museum Conservation Associates, whatever ICA stands for. And then we also have twisted rods on these gates as well. Now, I was going to walk down and show you the gate of the Greek Theater, which is 1916 and was by the Detroit Architectural Ironworks, but the sidewalk is really icy, and although my sister and my father both generously gave me pairs of gloves to wear at Live at 5, it is difficult to wear the gloves if you do not take the gloves with you. So I'm a little bit frigid, and I feel like we've learned enough today about our gates, and so I will just remind you that we have another live tour tomorrow on Facebook Live with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research page. And then on January 25th, remember that I start our History of American Architecture Cranbrook Visitors Lecture Series. And so this is the 4th annual History of American Architecture Lecture Series that I'll be delivering. It's 5 weeks, Mondays at 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's fully digital this year on Zoom. And so make sure that you go and sign up for those tickets at center.cranbrook.edu. And I will be back next Tuesday for another Live at 5. And maybe I'll choose an indoor spot, but probably I won't. I think next week, hopefully actually we'll be coming back from the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House, where we can see Melissa Webb's really incredible textile installation that is being put up in the Frank Lloyd Wright House as we speak. So thanks so much for joining me for this quick little Live at 5 with the gates of Cranbrook House and Samuel Yellin. Be safe, everyone, and I will see you around the virtual neighborhood soon.